Good morning. Welcome again to 938 Church. I'm Rachel. I'm one of the pastors here. It's really good to be with you. I want to start off by letting you guys know a little secret. We're friends, right? Because we're friends, I thought I would tell y'all a little secret, something that I do. When I am invited to someone's house, it's almost the first thing that I do. I find a way to get them to show me family photos. I just love it. I love it so much because there is something about seeing family photos that is a conversation starter. You get to see, okay, does this family, how many kids are in this family? Are there any grandkids? Does the family like dogs? Is it a blended family? What's the history of the family? Where does everyone live? Are people local? Do they live far away? And you get to figure out who takes after who. You've probably gotten that question through the years. Who do you take after in your family? And so for fun, I wanted to show y'all a few photos of my family to see who we take after. So this was Christmas from a couple years ago. As you can see, we love the dogs. All right, we don't have any grandkids in the family yet, but we have granddogs. And I am holding Gracie in the center, and Gracie's cousin is Sadie, who my dad is holding, who is sitting there. And then Aspen, who is the first grand dog, is the yellow lab there, and my sister-in-law is standing behind my brother. So I won't tell you how many takes it took for us to take that photo. There was a ball involved. It was a whole thing, okay? So that's the Short family. The second photo that you'll see is a picture of me and my brother. Off to the left, you can see that my brother is very excited to be taking this photo with his little sister. And yes, that is me. I didn't have a whole lot of hair when we took that photo. It was a little bit of a chunk. But and my brother, in the other photo, this is a photo of us a couple years ago at Longwood Gardens. Yeah, the next photo, you would not know that I am 5'9" in that photo, okay? And so the short men are not so short, all right? So that's my brother and my dad. And then you will see very quickly that it is not hard to tell who I take after in my family is my mom. So much so that I was showing some photos from our last family vacation to one of my best friend's daughters who calls me Aunt Rachel. And she looked at a photo of me and my mom and she goes, "It's Aunt Rachel and Aunt Rachel." And let me tell you, my mom being 30 years older than me felt very good about that comment. And so anyways, so I wonder who you take after in your family. Not only do we tend to take after our family in terms of appearances, but often in personality traits. If you are like my mom or dad, they tend to own all of my good qualities as part of their line, of like, you're ambitious and smart like me, right? But sometimes you lose your temper like your dad, right? And so we tend to do that sometimes, right? But the reality is that each and every one of us are a part of a family system. We can't help it. We walk into a place and we carry with us our family of origin. Psychologists use a tool that is referred to as the genogram. And basically what it is like is it's a family tree. You'll see a photo on the screen. And believe it or not, it's actually quite complicated. So this is not anyone's family. Don't worry about it. I literally Googled genogram, okay? And so this is a family tree or a genogram. And as you can see, there are all kinds of lines and dashes. And it's because those lines and dashes represent different patterns in the family. They represent our different family members close. Are there broken aspects in the relationship? Are there any divorces in the family? Are there any addictions in the family? Are there any physical ailments in the family? And it's actually, I mean, some of y'all are thinking to yourself, I would never want to do that with my family, okay? Sounds very depressing. But actually, I have found when I had to do this for a class, and there is something so powerful about understanding where you came from, because it grows your empathy for each person in your family, and you realize that we are not just one person, that we carry with us different patterns because of how we have been impacted through the years. And so you and I get to ask ourselves, what behavioral patterns do we want to continue? And what do we want to be a part of our legacy? We are in the midst of a series right now called You Had One Job. And throughout this series, like Mark mentioned, we have been talking about that we are a sent people. The Great Commission in Matthew 28 talks about that we are meant to go and make disciples, that our faith is not meant to be something for me, myself, and I, that it is meant to be shared with others. And we've been talking about how our faith is meant to be shared in our workplace and shared in the mundane aspects of our life. And this morning, we're talking about how our faith is meant to be shared with the next generation. Your life has a generational impact. If you have a Bible, you can turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 1. If you don't have a Bible, the text will be on the screen. We're going to read the first 12 verses of Deuteronomy chapter 6. This is Moses talking. He says, "These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant, then when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." So this passage was read by Moses. Deuteronomy is the last book in what is known as the Pentateuch, also known as the Torah. And the setting of Deuteronomy is the end of the 40th year since Moses had delivered the Israelites from Egypt. And the generation Moses is speaking to has in their family tree, has in their parents' generation, who has been disobedient to God despite God's faithfulness to them. They rebelled against him. They've been wandering in the wilderness, and they were unable to enter the promised land. And Moses takes this opportunity to talk to the next generation. And this is like the coach's pep talk before the championship game. Okay, this is the final words from your boss before you're about to go in to close a business deal. This is the last lecture from your favorite professor. And the speech is embedded with these three commands are these three kind of commissioning statements that Moses has. And the first one is simple. It's written in such a way, it's like three sections. The first section, listen to God. Listen to God, starting in verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Now, this is known as the Shema. Shema means in Hebrew to hear, but it doesn't mean just to hear with your ears. It actually has three definitions embedded in it. It means listen, it means pay attention, and it means act and obey. Listen, pay attention, act, and obey. Now, the Shema is a daily prayer in Judaism. For a pious Jew, the Shema is recited every single day, and it's recited in the synagogue on the Sabbath. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. And you know, what's interesting is when we read the Shema, it's easy for us to want to divide it up into different parts. Okay, I'm going to love God with my heart, and then I'm going to love God with my soul, and then I'm going to love God with my strength. But the Shema was never meant to be read that way. Moses here is saying that you are meant to love God with your whole self. You've probably heard someone say to you, like I have at times, "You're not hearing me. You're not hearing me." What they actually mean by that is your behavior is not suggesting that you have ever listened to me. You are not responding to me in a way that is someone who has listened to what I said. So Moses understood that he was talking to a group of Jews who knew the Shema, whose parents cognitively knew the law of God, but whose actions did not reflect their beliefs. And so he's saying to them, it would be almost like a cardiac surgeon who is going in to perform another heart surgery, and it's as if he is just sitting there, and he's saying, I know exactly how I would perform this surgery. I would make a small incision in the groin or the wrist, take the catheter, it'd go up. I'd take that little inflatable balloon thing, I'd take it up, it would go up, and then I would inflate the balloon, and then the stent would be left in, then I would deflate the balloon, then I would take it back out, right? Okay, did I watch way too many YouTube videos on this? Yes, I did. Okay, but he doesn't actually perform the surgery. He simply sits there and thinks about how he would do it. It would be like the guy who wants to ask out the girl, and he thinks about exactly how he would do that. He would go up to her, and he would say something kind of smooth, and then he would ask her out. But you know what? You can have a game plan and not have game, okay? So, and this is 2023. Ladies, you can also ask guys out too, okay? So this applies to you. So we think about things, right? We think, and for Christians, sometimes, man, I know that Jesus died for my sins, right? I know he rose again, right? And so, but what's interesting is Moses he's saying the Shema is not meant to just be heard. It is meant to be acted upon. You want to make a generational impact, you must listen with your whole being. Jesus, for emphasis, in Luke 10, verse 27, adds, love the Lord not just with your heart, with your soul, with your strength, but with your mind, emphasizing that every part of you, that when you love someone, you listen with every part of yourself. Paul says in Romans 10, 9 through 10, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. Listening requires a response from our heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's why when you hear someone, and maybe you yourself or you've heard me say that this is how I became a Christian or I came to faith, it's because someone may have grown up in church and known the beliefs of Christianity, known that Jesus died for their sins, but nothing in their life looks different because perhaps they've only been listening just with their mind. Because we are meant to not just confess with our mouth, we are meant to confess with our heart too. Confessing with our mouth and our heart and our soul and our strength changes the way we live. Moses is saying, you are not meant to be an observer, you are meant to be a participant. So the first thing that Moses is saying is listen to God. The second thing Moses says is give God away. Verse 7, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Notice that when he is referring to notice he says, your children. Your children. And it's because the historic teaching of the church is that it's the parents' responsibility to teach the faith to their children. And it's the church's responsibility to come alongside the parents. Let me see how. This is what happens sometimes when you have lots of notes. You get them out of order. So the reason we do things like group connect and encourage small groups so much is because you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot pour out to the next generation what has not been poured back in to you. And see, a small group is that safe environment where you can say, hey, I really don't understand this passage. Or I'm really struggling with one of my kids right now in parenting. Or I'm really struggling to believe that Jesus is who he said he is. Or I'm really struggling with this area of sin in my life. My small group this past week went around and shared the ways that we have seen how God has not given up on us. And man, it was so powerful. Because not only was it powerful for us to think about and remember, but it was also powerful to hear the stories of one another, the stories, the ways that God has been faithful. Now, for some in the room who don't have kids or don't have kids yet, there are still children and adolescents in your life who God has called you to, and frankly, who no one can minister to like you. No one can minister to like you. The passage says when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up, basically no matter where you are or what you're doing, you have an impact. You are meant to give God away. To protect the confidentiality of this person who is not connected to our church in any way, I wanted to share a story with y'all from a few months ago. There's a place I go frequently, and I have gotten to observe a man who goes to this place too, and he's there regularly. He's middle-aged, and he's super affable. I mean, everyone just loves him. He has a great ability to connect with people, and he just treats people so loving, and I always just kind of wondered if he was a Christian. And so one day I ran into him in the streets of Westchester, and I introduced myself, and I said, hey, let's say his name is Tom. I was like, hey Tom, this is so funny. It's kind of random, but I'm just curious. Are you a Christian? And he said, he was like, yeah, I am. And so we started talking or whatever, and I just said, hey, I'm so encouraged by you. I really see the way that you treat people, and And it's just been a big encouragement to me. And I was like, so where do you mind me asking, like, where do you go to church? And so he paused for a second and he said, Rachel, like just the past few years, I've just kind of been like in my own journey, kind of. I really haven't been in church. I've been studying the Bible regularly. I've actually been reading the Bible verse by verse and studying it just kind of on my own just kind of doing my own thing right now. And right when he said that, someone interrupted us. And by God's providence, that was a good thing, because I'll tell you what, like emotionally, I was kind of like really depleted in that moment. And I got really sad because I was thinking about this man, and I was thinking about the ways that he connects with others. And I was thinking about the impact that he could have in a church like ours or in churches in this area. And I got so sad. I got so sad, and so he started talking to this other woman, and then he returns to the conversation, and he says, Rachel, I'm so sorry, but I got to go. And I just said to him, I was like, hey, Tom, before you go, I just have to say, churches need men like you. Churches need men like you. And he kind of said, yeah, and walked off. And I haven't seen him since, which is probably good news for him. but y'all, I'm sorry, but I find that really tragic. Really tragic. Because I think, and I see that tragedy in myself, that kind of like, you know what, I just kind of want to do me. I just kind of want to study my Bible. I just kind of want to, I kind of want my group of friends. I just want my couple of friends, and I just want to kind of play it safe. But God is meant to be given away, and there is something in us all that wants this country club Christianity. And Moses is saying to the next generation, hey, you know what a country club in the wilderness is like? You know that because your parents experienced that, but you know what? I have more for you. I have a land flowing of milk and honey for you. Will you trust me? Will you trust me to satisfy your deepest longing? Some of us are so afraid to give God away because we are afraid that God is going to leave us hungry. And you don't have to walk with God for long to know that it is hard. It is hard to obey God day in and day out. And Moses knew this. He knew that the land that awaited the Israelites, the land of Canaan, was filled with people who degrade humanity, men and women who worship the sun and the weather and sex and war. And it sounds like, frankly, a lot like the world we're living in today. But a country club in the wilderness is no match for the promised land. It's no match for the promised land. Isaiah 58:10 says, if you pour yourself out for the hungry and you satisfy the desires of the afflicted, then shall your light rise in the darkness and your gloom be as the noonday. John Piper, in his book, Don't Waste Your Life, he says, love is doing what is best for someone. But making self the object of our highest affections is not best for us. It is, in fact, a lethal distraction. We were made to see and savor God, and savoring Him to be supremely satisfied and thus spread in all the world the worth of His presence. Not to show people the all-satisfying God is not to love them. To make them feel good about themselves when they were made to feel good about seeing God is like taking someone to the Alps and locking them in a room full of mirrors. To love someone is to show them an all-satisfying God. It's to give God away. Moses says to the next generation of Israelites, listen to God. Secondly, he says, give God away. And lastly, he says, don't forget God. Don't forget him. Verse 10. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant, then when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So Moses is reminding them in two ways. It's as if he's saying, remember those who have gone before you. What's interesting is when Moses is speaking to this generation of Israelites, he's speaking to them as if they were the ones who were actually delivered from Egypt. But we know the timeline is that it was the generation ahead of them. They weren't even around yet. They had experienced the blessing of freedom without enduring the costs. They didn't experience the plagues in Egypt. They didn't experience the same kind of persecution in Egypt. They only knew what they had been told. But this just goes to show that the message from previous generations transcends into future generations, and the message of the scripture transcends to our generation. And the good news of Christianity is that we get to experience the blessing of freedom without enduring the cost of the cross. Jesus endured the cross on our behalf. And other people's testimonies, the generation ahead of us, reminds us of the ways that God is at work in our lives too. Moses says, first, remember those who have gone before you. Secondly, he says, remember that God is the one who feeds you. God is the one who feeds you. The Shema, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, is meant to be recited over and over again. Why? Because we are a forgetful people. Our hearts forget that loving God satisfies our hunger. We forget because our cities have been built. We forget because our houses have been filled. We forget because our wells are filled with water, our vineyards and olive groves are flourishing, our 401k is doing well, our relationship status is what we want it to be, our kids are flourishing. We forget God. We forget God in the midst. God is the one who feeds us. From the age of 11 to 18, there was a group of about 4 girls who Jenny Worsham discipled, and I just happened to be one of them. And I grew up in the Dallas area, about 30 miles northeast of Dallas, and Jenny was 22 at the time when I was 11. And every Wednesday, she would drive. She was an accountant in downtown Dallas. She would drive from downtown Dallas to Rockwall. She would meet at the same Starbucks off of I-30 with us girls, and she would teach us about God's word. And some days we spent the entire time on prayer requests, typically connected to the boys we had crushes on, right? That was the majority of the time. And there were other times that we actually did study the word together. And, Jenny was this consistent presence time and time again. And, I grew up in a pretty large church, and I had a good youth group and church camp and stuff. But you know what? I don't really remember a ton about that, but I remember those Wednesdays. Just week after week of this young woman a little ahead of me teach me how to walk with Jesus. And there are few people in my life who have made a greater impact than Jenny. And she has been to weddings and celebrations and graduation ceremonies through the years. And I wanted to read a portion of a letter that she wrote us our senior year in high school. And it was before we went off to college. And it was her reminder, it was her remember God to us. And she had several points in this letter, but she said, the last point, she said, remember, Rachel, she said this to everyone, live a life above reproach. My prayer is that you girls will each stand out like a glowing light on your college campuses. You have the Holy Spirit inside of you, so people should instantly notice something different about you and wonder where your joy comes from. However, with this witness also comes great responsibility. Everything you do, say, wear, watch, and listen to will be closely observed by those who don't know Christ. Because of this, you must strive to live a life above reproach so that no one can find a fault in you. Read the book of Daniel for an example of this. Remember that one beer in your hand at a party, or one low-cut revealing dress or shirt, or one inappropriate movie you are seen coming out of could ruin your witness for someone forever. Be wise in your decisions. Don't do anything that would cause someone else to stumble, and just always remember that the world is watching you. Now, Jenny would be the first to say that perfection is not the goal, and that she would often teach us more about Christ through her own mistakes. And I know that I feel like my life has more of an impact on someone else when I just tell them all the ways I've done it wrong, right? But Jenny understood something, is that she understood that showing up in someone else's life has the ability to change someone's life forever. And so when I think about moments in my life and my decisions on if they really matter or not, I go back to this letter and I think about Jenny. And man, when I think about what I hope people say about me and people in our church, it's that, man, when asked the question, who do you take after? Like, who do you look like? I hope it's Jesus. I hope they say, man, you remind me of someone. You look just like him. You look just like him. You act like him. And so as we close this morning, we're going to do something a little different. The band's going to play a little bit, and I'm going to just leave some moments for us to spend some time with God individually. And I've listed 3 questions that I think would be good for us to just ask God on our own. And then after some time, Mark is going to come up and pray us out. But the questions are, first one, God, how do you want me to listen to you? How do you want me to listen to you? The second one is, God, to whom do you want me to give you away? To whom are you calling me to give you away? And third, God, where have I experienced reminders of your faithfulness? What do you want me to remember? I'm going to give you some time to just spend some moments with God as we pray through those questions.